Peace and healing. What's up, family? It's Twilight. Today's message comes from a commenter on my Facebook page who said, why is it that women don't want to take responsibility and they're always blaming the men? Is it really all the men's fault? And so I want to thank that person for leaving that comment, and I want to address that. So, okay, here's the first thing. When I do my posts, I want to be clear that we come from a manufactured and scripted mentality about gender, okay? We have very distinct roles that we are expected to play in our society. This is what Western society has done. It has programmed us a certain way. Notwithstanding, it has also programmed us with hierarchy. So, when I explain this, it's going to make clear sense. So stay with me on this. Okay, first and foremost, what is more valued? Is it more valued for you to grind, work hard, or is it more valued for you to flow in the essence of energy? So remember, the question is grind, work hard, flow in the essence of energy. If you had to think about the overall big picture, the answer is grind and work hard. Okay? And it is a growing movement for flowing in the essence of energy. Now, that's the description of the behavior. But let me tell you what it falls in line with. Grind and work hard falls in line with masculine energy. Flowing in the energy is feminine energy. Many other ideologies like this has been taken precedence over feminine energy. It has made the masculine principle and all the content that describes the masculine principle over the feminine principle. And also with the feminine principle being more nurturing, loving, giving by default, it gives way to say that that is a weaker energy. Now, as you know, we are children of colonization. So colonization came in, it was aggressive, it raped, it pillaged, it took, it stole. And what were the stories that we got about the Native Americans and the indigenous Africans? That they were welcoming, that they let the colonizer in, that they wanted to assist them. Now, at some point, they fought back. We know that with the Gullah Wars. But initially, they were not about the confrontation. So what does this mean? Our bigger overall cultural context is connected to savagery, aggressiveness, force, domination, making someone else suffer as a rites of passage to your greatness, seeing someone else be subordinate to you. You get where I'm going with this, right? So you fully understand that the cultural context as being children of a colonized land is going to take the cultural mentality of its colonizer. That is simple psychology. So in that, if we had to look at the colonizer's behavior, and I know there are other spiritualists that can back me up, it was masculine energy on fleek. The original toxic masculinity. Okay? So, now that I've clearly made the overall, painted the picture of what the culture is that we have grappled at, now we have to look at a microcosm, like the relationship between the male and the female. Okay? The genders. So, when the person asks me that question, I really have to answer it in two parts. when I think of evolution, because of the division between the genders, I have to think of what needs to evolve between each gender. So when it comes down to it, when I talk about the masculine principle, my theory, and many other spiritualists will back me up on this, is that the male needs to embody more feminine energy as a means to balance, whereas the female needs to embody more masculine energy as a means to balance. Now, when I talk about that in terms of dating, what does that look like? The males need to be more aware and cognizant of, one, their emotions, and two, how their lack of relationship with their own emotional interior can become toxic and very detrimental to any relationship. And the women need to become more strategic and recognize when someone is not good for them, although they may be feeling something differently. What this then does is this balances out masculine and feminine energy, as we are to embody both. That is yoga, sma tai wi. That is the balance of the right and left hemisphere of the brain. So once each gender embodies more of the other's gender's behavior types, we can have more balanced, fulfilling, less toxic relationships. You understand me? So when I talk to the women, I'm talking to them about strategy. Okay? Don't take on men that you have to learn values and principles. You should not have to teach an adult how to have integrity, how to have morals, how to be consistent. In some cases, some women can't handle men who don't know how to balance a checkbook, don't have discipline, unable to regulate their own emotions, continuously needing control and power without relent. That is some of the things that potentially each woman needs to think about as a potential deal breaker. And then when I talk to the men, I say, you already got the strategy. You already understand how to evaluate whether or not you have a worthy woman. Now, let's talk about your ego. Let's talk about how your ego is in place of who you really are, and how that particular mask is actually a self-saboteur of your own personal development. Okay? Now, this is not 100%, because every male is not in balance with his feminine energy, and every woman is not in balance with her masculine energy. And in fact, some women embody more masculine energy, whereas some men embody more feminine energy. Obviously, this is not a exhaustive list of a representation of the entire world and every single individual in it. It is simply just enough of the population whereby this information becomes significant. Okay? So since men understand mostly how to better evaluate a woman, then I can be comfortable saying that once you've evaluated that she is a worthy woman, now you have to step up to the plate. Now you have to look at yourself. Now you have to get rid of that ego. Too often, there are men that are constantly, even after they've identified that they have a good woman or a good worthy woman, whatever have you, they're still being led by ego. They're still being led by toxic masculine principles. They're still being led by their own insecurities and fears. And that becomes an emotionally labor-intensive job for the woman. And what you have to understand is everybody has different thresholds. So some women are just going to tap out and say, you know what? Hey, first of all, this is too much for me. certain aspects of this should have been fixed when you were in your adolescence, when you were a child. The other aspect of this is growing pains, but this particular aspect I can see was something that should have been fixed when you were a child. Since it wasn't, now you're upheaving all that baggage onto me. That's totally unfair. I'm not going to allow that into my system. That is one of the conclusions that you could come to. But speaking as a woman who has at one point accepted the mental programming from society, I totally believe that it was totally my responsibility to make sure that every man was emotionally kept, even if he was at a deficit and not quite even at a level of an adult, to have an adult partnership with me. His reasoning skills were more geared towards that of an adolescent or a child, even though he stood before me as an adult male and he was able to carry out certain things like working a job and paying bills. But ultimately, when it came to his emotional reasoning skills, they simply were not there. And then I made it my job to carry it, which then was so heavy on me, it eventually weighed down on me. And it eventually was not fair. It became toxic, and I became drained, and I acted out because I didn't understand what was going on internally with me. But the solution to that is to tap into my masculine energy. Identifying what your red flags are. Identifying what your value system are, and only dealing with a person based on similar shared values. Understanding that you're going to have to take that time to really get to know people and go through that frustration of these long, drawn out conversations, outings, and back and forths before you can really truly lead up to a relationship, okay? You're just going to have to take the time and the research. Setting healthy boundaries. That's more in my masculine energy. So the way that the sister took it that was on my Facebook is by holding men accountable for standards like integrity and emotional sobriety. I was getting down on the men, and I wasn't. What I do notice is there are a lot of women who can't properly, or who haven't properly came to the conclusion of what is actually happening in their lives. They don't recognize their own codependency. They don't recognize the way that they have emotionally neglected and sacrificed themselves. So because they haven't come to the they have not recognized this within themselves, they are constantly looping back and forth in draining relationships where they are raising man children. And unfortunately, that is at some point going to become your own fault. And all of the consequences you suffer are going to be to your own detriment. And that would be a choice, because you're not either getting the mental and the emotional help you need, or your feminine energy has been exploited too much and you haven't gotten the validation, love, and help that you need. Okay? So at some point, it's no longer going to be the fault of any male. It is going to be your responsibility to actually go ahead and get the mental and emotional help that you need, either by way of a spiritual coach, or if need be, a therapist or a psychologist. None of these things are things to be ashamed of, because unfortunately we've been endowed as a society with a lot of unhealthy emotional jargon and programming. So to release that, sometimes you're going to need a guide. You're going to need help, both male and female. You feel me? So that said, you must understand that my plight at this point is the balance of energy. It is my odds. And I recognize that there are a lot of women who need to tighten up their strategy when it comes to dating and relationships, and understanding the balance between self-care, self-love, and caring for another. And understanding when they've gone too far into the codependency area and what that looks like, as well as the healing process and what it will take to get to the other side. In addition to that, with the males, the same thing. Recognizing and addressing your vulnerability. Being okay with being in an emotional state. Being okay with not having all the answers. Being okay with not being perfect in everything you do and succeeding in everything you do. And recognizing when the ego has really become too much of a driver and your own soul has become a passenger in your life. You see? So it's all about the balance of energy. So the message is going to be different for the male and for the female. So I hope this clears a few things up. It's Twilight saying peace.